Motivational Mindset Podcast, episode 12, with me, Richard Knight, from Switch Motivation. This week, I'm talking to Gav Cross, the Storyteller. Hello, Gav. How are you?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening. Hello. You have known me, and you haven't changed. You haven't changed a bit. You're full of youth and vitality, and whereas I am a broken old man.
Well, or it's called maturity and wisdom. I think is that's the better way of putting it.
Let's go. Let's reframe all of that. Let's reframe.
Good, isn't it? It's good, isn't it? Now, Gav, thanks ever so much for spending some time with me today to have a chat, and so our listeners can hear all about what it is you do. Because I reckon this is brilliant. Because we've had, and I was just mentioning to Gav earlier, we've had some helicopter pilots on, ex-professional sports people, chief umphers, actors, agents. We've had a lot of people on here, but we haven't had a storyteller. Tell us about that, Gav. What storytelling? I mean, just a quick sort of understanding so people can understand. I mean, yeah, okay. we know what that is, but how do you make a living out of that?
Well, that's funny. Well, funny you should say that, because that's exactly what people do infer. Because when you go to events, I work in festivals, and this genuinely happened to me. I say this, and then it happened to me recently. People say to me, "Oh, and what do you do?" And I say, "Oh, I'm a storyteller." And then they'll look me in the eye and they'll say, "What does that mean?" And of course, everything inside of me is screaming, "I think the clue's in the title." But the truth is, they're asking the same question, which I appreciate is more direct. Is that a real job? And of course, yes, because I'm doing it, and it's not just me. And actually, I feel like a bit of a fraud saying I'm a storyteller. I'll explain a little bit more.
Yeah.
But yes, I tell stories. My background is teaching. That's all I wanted to be. And then, like all of us on the path of life, we take these side steps. So I was a public services manager for a local authority and primary care trust for a while, worked on training projects. But all at the same time, I was also always, because my background is theatre and drama, directing and working in community services and community practice, and making things happen with people, for people, about people, all the way along, and running lots of workshops and working in lots of schools and education adjacent places. And I found myself in 2019 in this position where I was working a lot in schools, mostly doing lots of different things, through theatre, through drama. And I found myself in a position where I needed to be economically viable for people, because money was going. Money in the education sector was flowing out of it. And it was desperate, and it still is desperate times. So, of course, schools have to make these choices. Who do they want? Do they want a member of staff? Do they want to feed kids who might be hungry? Or do they want to spend money on going to the theatre or getting a drama guy in? And that was running out, and it was making me feel just desperately sad, not just for me, but for schools. But I found myself in this situation where I could deliver for large groups of young people really satisfying drama events through story. Instead of a drama workshop, instead of a theatre workshop, a skills-based workshop, I would do that through story. I would tell a story, and then they'd help me retell, remake a story, classic stories, old stories, new stories. And then I found myself playing around with those stories. At the same time, I was, for fun, working with some brilliant people, and we used to do a little bit of stand-up comedy back in the 90s, and I was promoting comedy, and I put on a little festival here where I live in Liverpool, an alternative comedy festival, and my kids said to me, "What can we come and see?" And I looked at it and went, "Oh, nothing." So I put on a gig for families, Funny Looking Kids. Funny Looking was a podcast. I had a podcast, Richard.
Oh, I see.
I know, back in 2011, when I had to explain what podcasts meant.
Yeah, I was going to say, you were ahead of the game there.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And we interviewed comedians and performers about what they did. They were nobodies. James A. Caster.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Simon Munnery. And then everybody else. Then we gave up because nobody was listening. And then about 2 years later, everyone was listening to podcasts. So could have been a contender. So we're running this comedy club for kids, and my part was to host and wrangle And I found myself telling silly stories in between that. So back to 2019, I'm standing in front of 100 plus young people, all there for a weekend of theatre and drama. And I had these brilliant practitioners who were running workshops, and I was running the weekend. And I said to them, all of these people make theatre. All of these people are serious professionals. And inside, my brain was going, you're not. So I thought, well, that's the call, isn't it? And so I put together a show, a family storytelling show, and I kind of threw it out into the wind, not knowing what to do. And through some connections, I got an invite to tour that in the Northwest where I live, in a network, rural touring network, family storytelling show. And that developed into another show. And then I threw that out into the wind, and that turned into a tour. Mm-hmm. And suddenly I'm making family shows, but then COVID hit. So what I then did was take the time to throw myself into networking, which I know is something we have talked about before. I hate it. But at the time, everything was moving online. And so these organizations, arts, creative organizations, were online. And I was in those meetings and Zooms. I was in those conversations. And it was just not all the time, because, of course, we all spent a lot of time sat in the sun drinking wine. But whilst, terrible things fell around us in the entire society of fabric of life. But I was also used it as career development, I think.
Yeah.
And that meant that I have one of the kind of both advantages and disadvantages of who I am. People looked at me and thought, he's old. He must know what he's doing. And so suddenly people started throwing me opportunities. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I'm doing, Richard.
So but that's a really, that's a really interesting point, actually, and it's one that I've touched on with various other guests as well. Actually, it is that age piece, that idea that when people look at you. I mean, don't know about you, I don't feel particularly old. I'm still 20.
Depends on the day.
When and the weather, of course. So the old joints. But apart from that, and did that impact your motivation, or have an impact on the way you went and did things? Because people were going, "Oh, you must know what you're doing." Were you sitting there going, "Crap, crap, crap"? I literally, how do I do this? What am I going to do?
Yes, of course, internally, but it's the external, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And you're kind of always chasing what's next. So if people are throwing me opportunities, or I'm seeing opportunities. So my opportunities, I have to make them all myself. I'm an unfunded creative. I have applied, but I don't get any Arts Council funding for what I do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because I make the shows that I want to make. I'm very selfish like that, because I think I make the shows that I can do, and I think my audience, such as it is, wants to see. And this is why I consider myself a bit of a fraud as a storyteller. I'm much sillier than lots of brilliant storytellers. I'm less sincere, perhaps. I like my audience to leave after an hour if it's a family audience, an hour and a half with an interval, and a raffle if it's a rural touring grown-up audience, having had a good time.
Yeah.
So I gave myself goals, and my goals, and they're a constant, and that's the positive and the negative. It is my measure of success is, am I sustaining myself? Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. Am I enjoying myself? Well, not always, because if I was, then there'd be something wrong, because that's not humanity.
Yeah.
But am I generally enjoying what I do? Yes, with the anxiety of being a performer and a creative around that. Mm-hmm. And so what's my career path? Keep going. Do fewer. I'm aspiring to do fewer performances to more people. Mm-hmm. But the reality, if I was being not so glib, is have a reputation with both an audience and people that program that says, okay, we need to do something. We've got a hole here, and I say this, it's not a visual medium. It's a Gav size hole. So it's a big hole. It's a big hole, 6 foot tall, 6 foot wide. But I'm very lucky that with a small group of people that know me, I'm very, very pleased to say, invariably work with me again.
Great.
and they're interested in what I'm doing. Not always, and that's a marker for them. And also with arts organisations that are many of them are centrally funded, and they struggle with that. They can't work with the same people all the time. But when it comes to it, I'm very lucky as I sit here. I would say I'm in creative overwhelm, but that's because I've got lots of shows coming up and lots of different shows coming up. And then I got a call last week and somebody says, "Oh, we've got this gap here and we've got a bit of funding. Do you want to do something?" And of course, being, both freelance and creatively greedy, I say yes. So as we sit here between now, so my marker is December 25th. I'm debuting one show on Saturday, 2 shows the following Saturday. These are different shows; they're not performances. And then another show that week, and that's so 2 of those are for theatres, 2 of those for libraries, and then I've got a touring show which I'll probably do about 35 performances with. A show I've just toured, I'm doing a couple of performances within December, and then because I'm stupid, there's a show I need to debut on December 23rd for grown-ups that I probably won't even look at again until next year. But I've always got to throw something in the water, bait, chum, whatever metaphor you want,
absolutely,
for myself. So always, the motivation is what next?
I was going to say, when you're getting that feast and famine sort of situation, because a lot of people running their own businesses, or whatever they do, it's very, very, prevalent in terms of how you work on that. How do you keep yourself going then? The funding, people say, no, you can't have any money, Gav. By the way, you've got 25 things to do next week, and then for the next 2 months after that, we got nothing for you. There's nothing happening.
Yeah.
How do you keep that creative mind going? Are you working on stuff? What do you get up to?
It's a really odd thing to do because I think my brain, and it's a neurodivergent brain, one of those recently annoyingly, surprisingly diagnosed. It's not really a big surprise, isn't it? Trendy these days, neurodivergent people. I know that again, using lots of metaphors, I'm always mulling. I'm always stewing. My brain sometimes is in slow cooker mode. And we all love a satisfying slow cook, don't we? Throw the ingredients in, switch it on, low and slow, walk away, come back. What have we got? So I'm always mulling, what's next? What's next? So I've got to finish. So very often I'm just about to. Revelation. We had a nice cup of coffee recently and a chat. Because I was on a tour on a show that so winter 23 I did some performances of. Winter 24, when we had a coffee, I did a tour of, and winter 25 I'm hoping to do a big tour of. But that came out of me reading ghost stories, and I read ghost stories online. For a small but lovely audience. We do it on Twitch, where everybody else plays Grand Theft Auto and Fortnite. I read Victorian ghost stories. And somebody says to me, "Oh, do you know these stories? These old Jerome ghost stories?" I'm like, "No." So I read them and I liked them. They were funny. They were interesting. They were different. They were quite contemporary, but still 120 years old. And so suddenly, spark. So I've read over the last 3 years, 80 to 90 ghost stories. And this one was a spark. Oh, that's something. So then I went to someone, instead of applying for funding, there's a theme emerging here. I took some cakes and some coffee to an organization, a brilliant organization here in the Northwest, spot on, and said, "I've got this idea. I'd like to do this. I'd like to do that. I'd like to do this." And they're like, "Oh, okay." So they went and found a little pot of money. And that little pot of money was from a library service that wanted to put something in for grown-ups in the day, in the afternoon. And as soon as I did that, I was able to say to somebody else, a theatre in Wiltshire, "I've got this. I'm doing this." And they went, "Oh, we'll have that. You come down and do this. Do that in the evening." Great. So suddenly little things are coming into play. Now there's a bigger journey behind that. I've got to make the show. I've got to make it work. That's a different conversation to the theme of this. But now my motivation is I think it's all right, and audiences think it's all right. I just had a nice review, a couple of sold out shows. Wow, awful thing. But now I've got to turn that into a self-produced tour for next year.
Mhm.
So constantly, my motivation is to, how do I actually, probably it sounds lazier than I intended to. How do I stop making new stuff, and how do I really strengthen what I've got? These shows.
Mm.
So my idea then was, okay, so what's my motivation? Well, I've got my audience. It's a family audience. This is a ghost story show for grown-ups. Don't like saying adult show. It sounds wrong.
Yes,
Um,
very, very.
yeah. So I came up with a young person or family ghost storytelling show. So then my motivation is, okay, if somebody wants me and says, "Get Gav, what have you got?" Because people are very nice. They say, "What have you got?" I say, "Oh, I've got this ghost story show." And then I can say, "Oh, by the way, I've got this grown-up show for adults as well." And sometimes people are like, "Oh, well, that's interesting." Um, so what's in the back of my head is, I've got these shows. I'm working on them. I'm working them up to bigger tours each year into different places. But what's next?
Yeah.
Because the people I've already thrown this at the wall with, they want to know what's next. If I
Mm.
want to maintain, so back to the motivation is mulling. So I'm reading and I'm looking and I'm looking, I'm thinking, but
Yeah.
I lean into what I enjoy, which sounds selfish. So if I'm enjoying it, because I'm going to have to sit with it for a few years, bubbling under, bursting out, it can't be something that I'm cynically pursuing
Yeah.
because I'll lose
Mm.
interest.
Yeah.
Mm,
Absolutely. And then that's the time the energy starts to drop as well.
mm.
And then therefore when you're actually doing it, it's not coming quite across as brilliant as you would like it to be, presumably. But so it sounds like you keep yourself going all the time. So when you go away, then if you're going away on holiday, how do you relax? How do you stop
I,
that brain keep thinking about stuff, or doesn't it usually
the
carry on?
truth is that I am also one of those people that doesn't like a holiday
Okay.
that goes on for a long time,
Yeah.
because it is I'm in one place. I was that dad that just dragged kids to castles. Right, we're doing something.
Yeah.
We're doing something.
Yeah.
We're going somewhere. I think, of course, there's a converse of that. Is there's the times when you kind of are in a creative slump, and you might have spent a few days in the house doing nothing,
Yeah.
because that's the nature both of the work and kind of perhaps the personality. But yeah, I don't think you can switch off, because you're always thinking. So I have to do other things to mull the brain. Now I can't, if I throw myself perhaps into watching something, I can't think about my own work. So I
Yeah.
have to do other things. I have to do something silly. So do silly things on the internet, maybe performative, little, tell another
Yes.
story, record
Yeah.
another story,
Hmm.
find another book,
Hmm.
um, throw something out. And it's not like it's, and oh, go on, the metaphors that I'm coming to, I'm just realizing it's like therapy. Thank you. I'm chasing the next high.
Yeah.
Now, for
Yeah.
me at the
Yeah.
minute, it's
Yeah.
Victorian, weird, and supernatural fiction.
Hmm.
And because I know, but also I know that there are people out there doing brilliant, brilliant work around this. I'm looking for the silly stuff. So for some reason, in my non-family work, I've just toured Jerome K. Jerome, who wrote Through Men in a Boat, After Supper Ghost Stories. Next year, I threw something at the wall with a friend who's a musician, and we're working up an abridged version of War of the Worlds. Now, the problem with War of the Worlds is, one, it's brilliant. Two, it's a
Hmm.
classic. Three, everyone thinks of Jeff Wayne,
Yeah.
and all
Hmm.
they want is Jeff Wayne.
Yeah.
And Jeff Wayne's very clever enough to have created a masterpiece that is now a giant attraction in London and tours
Hmm.
constantly. But actually, the text is incredible still.
Hmm.
So that's bubbling. As a side to that, I'm also next week doing an abridged reading of The First Men in the Moon, another H.G. Wells, which is actually very silly.
Hmm.
He was having fun with it. Um, And also, he was kind of like two fingers up to Jules Verne, who
Yeah.
had first men on the moon. So it's very British, satirical, but scientifically interesting. And so suddenly I'm in this, oh, what's the next thing?
Mm.
That's three things I've not taken to full fruition.
Yeah.
But you might have something in the slow cooker cooking whilst also going to the shops for tomorrow's meals.
Oh, I'm loving these. These are brilliant. Well done. Is everybody keeping up with these?
This is my brain. Sorry, I'm
No,
caffeinated.
it's very true because there's always something that piques your interest, and that's interesting from a motivational point of view. That if that's going to give you energy, then that's the way you operate. There's a lot of people who are very very focused and have almost that expert motivation and want to just delve down into very specific areas and don't move out of that. Now obviously from a creative point of view that may be a slightly different way of operating for you, but it sounds like that gives you the energy that you need. And if anybody is wanting to listen to a story, because I don't think enough people do actually. I think Gav's readings are absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure he'll provide us with some information about where to find him on all these marvelous social media stuff later on. But the other thing that you do quite a bit is quite a bit of work with your cousin, I hear.
Yes, he keeps me very busy. My
Mm-hmm.
cousin, everyone's a storyteller. I say this to families. I say this to young people. We're all storytelling, and I say that to young people. Who here wants to be a storyteller? Some people put their hands up because they're being funny, which is great. I would have done it if I was a kid, and that gives me
Yes.
a way in. But everything, and then I say to them, who wants, all right, of course you don't want to be a storyteller. Why would you? Who wants to be a YouTuber? Hands go up. Not YouTuber these days. It's a TikToker. Hands go up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who wants to, be a singer? Who was all storytelling.
Mm.
But if everyone's a storyteller, that also includes my cousin, Father Christmas.
He's your
And
cousin.
he is my cousin.
Is he?
We look similar. He's my
Mm-hmm.
cousin, 2 times removed from family parties I've been at his place, so we don't talk anymore.
No. Okay.
He really helped me out in lockdown. I can tell you this very quickly. It might be interesting. I got a message very early from an old student of mine, actually, somebody I taught way back, who's wonderful. And they said this round robin email was going round to kids from Father Christmas saying, "Don't worry, it's difficult. You might be sad. It's worrying, but don't worry."
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said on the mum's WhatsApp, "Wouldn't it be great if we can get Father Christmas to read this or to video this?" And she said, "Oh, I know someone who knows Father Christmas." So she sent it to me, and I got a video arranged. And because it was just a thing, I sent her this video of
Yeah.
Father Christmas saying, "Don't worry," a version of that. It's going to be okay. I just sent her a Google link. The next thing I know, someone's telling me, "Oh, your cousin's everywhere." What? So this link was being passed around, this Google link, and it was going into school leaflets and news. And somebody downloaded it and popped it on their Facebook account, and it was hitting 1 million. And I was saying, "Oh, I helped my cousin Father Christmas write and produce that.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you could put a link to me." And they went, "Yeah, sure." Took them 2 weeks, just when the bell curve of engagement was dropping. Then somebody contacted me and said, "Could you record us a Father Christmas message for our group?" I think they were a kung fu karate group. And I said, "We'll pay you." And it felt really cynical and it was a business transaction, but it felt really cynical. I said, "We'll pay what you want. Here's a link, PayPal." So I helped record a video, sent a video, and they said, "That's fantastic. Can we share this with other?" Yeah. So suddenly, and I wasn't doing no promotion because I say it's very, very cynical. It was April or something, very early. Producing Father Christmas messages for karate clubs in North America, and then sending a donation. I'm going to tell you this.
Hello. Hope you're enjoying this episode. When you've finished, why not subscribe to the Motivational Mindset Podcast to learn more about motivation in business and beyond. Thanks. Now, back to the podcast.
If you're going to do a donation, pay what you want based model. The UK are very, very not generous. North America and Canada. Oh, if you that very niche to any of your listeners, you want to produce Father Christmas video messages to karate clubs, do it because they're like, "Man, that's amazing. Here, thank you for it."
Yeah.
Bang. and the donation was there. Anyway, so I parked that because it was just like, I'm not going to promote this. Are your kids sad? Are they a bit scared? I a message from Father Christmas in July. No.
Yeah.
So then I ended up doing that as a pay what you want model through lockdown, and it worked. It
Hmm.
sustained me. Someone who didn't get anything in my direction, that sustained me. And so I then
Yeah.
turned that into a show. Pre-lockdown, I had a show called Twisted Christmas Tales, and that was Gav Cross delivering that. Post
Hmm.
lockdown, that was adapted into Father Christmas Storytelling, and that's when 35 shows. And what I wanted, I did it 1 year. I used to get told off. I did 1 year as in a grotto, pretending to be Santa. That's why I'm the cousin of Father Christmas, not Santa. Santa is very much about getting the money from families.
Hmm.
Father Christmas is about time and magic. So Santa was told how many minutes he had with each family because they needed to get them out to sell them the picture they've just taken. And my Santa kept getting told off. I hated it. So Father Christmas for me was the flip side of that. Come and spend time with Father Christmas. He's an idiot. He's a fool. He's one of the lords of misrule. He is eat, drink, and be merry. He is the
Hmm.
Christmas of the Northern European winter. He's not Saint Nicholas. He's not Santa Claus, Sinterklaas, the man that tells you to be good or you won't get anything. The man that gives
Hmm.
lots of things to rich kids and very little to poor kids because by implication they're naughty.
Mm.
Father Christmas brings very little often because might bring a small gift, but what he brings is joy and laughter and stupidity. Spend time with him, and then each family comes up and they can take a photo with no extra cost.
Hmm.
So to me it was about turning something into a close dynamic relationship. Listen, tell you a secret. All right? Father Christmas is very busy. It's me. I have to do it.
No way.
But it is the most delightfully, and I'm a very cynical person, of delightfully uncynical thing I do
Hmm.
because it enables me to to go and work with producers and say, I've got this show, and then we do it together and we do it as a split, and then that will sustain me. That's my
Nice.
bread, butter, and jam as a freelancer for a couple of months. Pays for things, sorts me out, gives me thinking space.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then and that's been going a few years now, and I'm just experimenting with a little bit of touring on that as well. But it's a
Okay.
beautiful thing that does motivate me because I have to get it right. So this weekend the first story is running out, and I've been mulling on that all year.
Hmm.
Just over there's a stack of, well, here's one here. This is a Victorian book of Christmas, and I remember buying that in February, and just dipping in and dipping in. But they said this week it's pouring out all of my thinking, all of my notes, all of my mulling, literally, and
Hmm.
figuratively, is coming out into a story. And then with this weekend, with an organization who throws me a little bit of money, um, I'm going to do 3 shows in Darwin Marketplace, and each show it will be slightly different. And then
Hmm.
as I have done, help switch on the Christmas lights of Darwin. But that then means when I get to the next weekend, I'm doing the first show for my own work, and then I'm prepared, and then I
Hmm.
do a run of shows which culminates into Wiltshire, a theatre that used to have me to do it online, and then I did it in person last year for a day, and this year it's 2 days, so that's 6 shows in 2 days. And if I can build that, it
Yeah.
both motivates me creatively,
Hmm.
it satisfies my disgusting need for recognition and people saying, "Oh, you're all right,"
Yeah.
but also it sustains me. It
Yeah.
becomes, that goes back to that first thing when people are asking, "You're a storyteller. What does that mean?"
Yeah.
It's my job.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a it's a really interesting one. So in terms of the stories that you tell, obviously it's across different ones, people are probably thinking they're going, well, stories these days, everybody
Mm-hmm.
get them on like you've got Netflix, you watch as many stories as you like. We don't need somebody reading something to us, surely. How do kids react to it these days? Have you seen a change, or is there a change, or are
No,
they what is it
no,
like?
Um, I get this in schools. I
Mm.
get this from teaching colleagues, and I still feel like a teacher, even though I've not taught for 20 years, perhaps. I've been in education. People will say that.
Mm-hmm.
I think like anything, any art form, any sport, anything that where you, the internal observer, has to engage with something, it has to be good. And if it's good and it's done, the trick, isn't it? The trick is I have to look like I know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I have to look like I know either what's coming next or I'm so catastrophically chaotic, it's funny. And I lean into that.
Mm-hmm.
I lean into being the idiot. I describe myself as an idiot and as a clown, even though I look very authoritarian and I
Mm-hmm.
pretend to be. And I am horrible to kids. My shows, I say this, my introductory line is I say horrible things to nice children. But it looks like today I'm going to have to say nice things to horrible children. And then the audience, the kids go, oi! And you can see there's a sparkle in their eye. And I might go into a school, and I go into fewer and fewer schools these days. I'm going into a school. Well, I might have lost
Yeah, just briefly.
a second. It's coming back.
It's coming back.
There's a technical problem. Can you hear me
That's
now?
it. Yeah, we got you. I'll just cut
Yeah.
it out. It's fine. No worries.
I'm going into a school next week that I'm going to regularly, and it's a joyous place. And we're adding a show for families at the end. And it's one of those schools where they get it. Kids want to sit and listen. And in fact, the first time I went there was some problem with the timetable. And I said to them, well, I'll have them for an hour and a half instead of an hour. And it's like, oh, they won't sit. And then they did. And we laughed. And in fact, that school I remember, and why I love going back, the teachers were on their feet shouting at me in the game and joy. They were having a great time. So I think people do want to sit and listen.
Mm.
They do, because it is just a mechanism. Netflix, things on your phone, they're mechanisms of delivery.
Mm.
And we call it doom scrolling, but it's just if things are short form and we're not interested, we just move on.
Mm-hmm.
But even if it's short form, we're interested, we'll watch till the end, because actually that's a kind of rather simplistic view of what's online. Because one of the biggest things, you take TikTok, and if you're of a certain age, like TikTok, that's just full of kids dancing, and it's like, no. TikTok are moving to a model where they want and are rewarding, the algorithm is rewarding longer form.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is YouTube rewards that. I now go to YouTube and watch documentaries about the things I'm interested in. I was just in the kitchen yesterday, and I've been watching a recipe thing by Marco Pierre White, and it popped into my head. Wonder what Marco Pierre White and Gordon Ramsay really think of each other. Tap, tap, tap. So whilst I'm doing something in the kitchen, someone has done, there's a choice of half an hour deep dives into that relationship. Really well made, incredibly well produced, and they've all got millions of hits. So I think there's a carapace of perception which feels right, which I think is a different conversation. Oh, yeah, no one's got an attention span. Whereas actually we know no one's got an attention span. Anyway, what have you been binging? Oh, yeah, I just watched 8 episodes of Rings of Power. Yeah, and kids these days don't have an attention span. What are they watching? Oh, my kids are watching every episode of Mr. Beast, and they're an hour long. So I think it feels right, but I don't think it is true.
Mm-hmm.
That if it's good quality, hopefully, and I'm not always that, they will sit and listen. Everyone wants to, if it holds your attention. Now, I find I can hold my attention by flipping the visual narrative. I look like one thing, I present in a different way. I'm a silly old man. That's how I play into. And kids, when they get that, they really get it. And then that enables me. So for instance, the Ghost Story show, if I'm throwing thrills in, if I'm throwing things that feel like, oh, this is exciting, then they'll sit and listen, because they'll know. So I was in Manchester Libraries last week. We had 4 classes into this beautiful space in the Central Library. And I'm telling a story, but I've already set it up and said, if you interrupt me, and I'm not telling you off, if you interrupt me, if you jump in the silences, then that tells me how scared you are. Because the silences are when we get very scared, the darkness and the quiet. So when you interrupt, you're just showing everyone that you're scared. And then that enables me, just by setting it up, to tell stories. And I do tell small children scary stories, but I've told them it's not scary. They're usually shaggy dog stories. They'll end in a particular way, and you'll be a bit disappointed, if not angry. But in the middle, you'll be scared and you'll
Yeah.
forget. And that's where the enjoyment comes.
Hmm.
If you clear the path, children, grown-ups will sit and focus for as long as you can hold them if the quality of what you do is
Yeah.
good enough. And that's brilliant. Going back to doing the comedy for kids, lots of people said to me, "Oh, I wouldn't do that. Kids don't laugh," which tells me they don't spend a lot of time around kids. They don't laugh at things that are not funny.
Mm.
They want to laugh at everything else. So if you're a comedian and you won't do kids comedy because you're worried they won't laugh at you, well, you're not meeting the criteria, which is
Hmm.
be funny.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's the same with storytelling. If you're telling a story, I think with any art form, lots of creatives will blame the audience. Oh, that audience last night was terrible. I didn't have a brilliant gig recently, and I think I wasn't on it.
Hmm.
I didn't then capture with the restrictions and challenges of the situation I was in. I didn't adapt enough. It can't be just the audience.
Mm.
It's always the material. So yeah, people do
Mm.
a long answer to a short question. I think children and adults will sit and listen over a long form piece if it's
Yeah.
good.
Well, I mean, I distinctly remember sitting there with my dad reading me stories when I was a kid at bedtime, and I can
Audiobooks are huge.
I mean, it's brilliant, and that, from an imagination point of view, it's one of the key things, isn't it? It's making sure that people can really go deep into their own thoughts, their own minds, and come up with stuff. Because otherwise, you're just doing the same thing over and over again. Because that's what Netflix showed. This is what it should be. Whereas actually, I know when I read that book or I heard that story, I thought it was different.
And there's a deliciousness to going to some kind of source. And also the fact is there is no source material. Great artists and creatives are always looking back. So I'm always mulling. I'm holding another book to your camera so you can see. So this is a book of Greek myths.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
bought this because I love the illustrator, but actually I found myself 2 nights ago. I picked this book up and started reading it. I was really enjoying it, a retelling of the Greek myths, but it goes back to the early Greek myths. And it's Corgi Press, so it's designed for kids.
Hmm.
It's really horrible, and the pictures are quite fruity. But it's designed for kids in the 1970s. Um, and it's all very intriguing. And then I had to throw it down because I'm like, no, because I had work to do. I shouldn't be reading this book. I've got to be reading this book, which I'm doing
Yes, you're
for
good.
work.
Yeah, yeah,
But it drew me in. It would just hooked me because it's a good story, well retold.
yeah.
And so that's why you must have comfort books and comfort films and comfort TV
Hmm.
series that you return to. And that's why, every single tiny town, and that's why I'm avoiding it for good reason. I don't think I'd do it justice. That's why Christmas Carol is
Yeah.
everywhere
Hmm.
at this time of the year because it's a brilliant story, brilliantly told. It's a ghost story. It's a
Mm.
horrible story. If it's done right, it's a socio-political commentary on poverty.
Hmm.
If you stick Muppets in it, it's fun as well. But the quality of it is the story.
Yeah.
And that's why we return and we return. That's why it's reread, because the comfort comes from, losing ourselves in a good story, well told.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we come to the end of our little conversation here, we've got some great insight into storytelling and what that's all about, and the brilliance that it can bring to a lot of different audiences. From that motivational point of view, you've spoken a lot about that. And I said before we came on that I was going to ask you what you might think would be a little top tip for anybody listening in terms of motivation. How do you keep yourself, what's the key thing do you think other people could use to keep themselves energized in what they're doing, whether it's being an accountant or a teacher or
Um,
whatever?
well, I don't know. I think for me is I'm always looking because my work is quieter in January,
Hmm.
February, March,
Mm.
and that's my mulling creating time. I look for training and courses and CPD. Now, for me, it's a bit different to your accountant who's updating their processes and skills post a budget.
Hmm.
I'm looking for theatre training. I'm looking for, I don't go on storytelling courses. Perhaps I should, but I might go on a clown course. which is not big red nose and big shoes. It's like theatrical clown, physical comedy, something with a theatre company, something with a theatre practitioner I admire, something in a particular style. And I do that, and I know it terrifies me. I used to be a teacher. I know education is hard. We are very unforgiving of kids who have to go every single day, and the pressure of learning is really something that grown-ups, adults avoid massively. We used to have loads more opportunities. There's a hunger for it. Adult learning. When we were kids, our schools were turned into adult learning centers, weren't they? People would go and learn how to do something. It used to be subsidized. You can go and learn some art, some creativity, some writing, some photography using this brilliant community resources. Now we pay people online and we watch it as a video. But back then, so I do something that scares me.
Yeah.
Do something to remind myself and come up with a new skill, and it does work. I mean, years ago I went on a clown theatre course because I was working in community, and it informed how I became as a public sector trainer massively. I was training something to experts in a field I was not an expert in, but I'm quite good at training. So I had to find a way in, and my way in was idiocy. I'm the biggest idiot in the room, but I'm more informed than you. So as an idiot who's more informed than you, it is incumbent upon you to get that information out of me and then show me how clever you are. And so playing the game of being an idiot, of course, it's a big nod and a wink. Everyone accepts that. But now I use that in my performance style constantly. So that's how I stay motivated. Right. I believe that I do not know what I'm doing. I both believe and know that. But I know that there are people out there who are better at pretending they don't know what they're doing and are confident enough to say, I've got a couple of little ideas. Let me share them with you. And then I can take that. So that's how I stay motivated. So I go and see things. I go and watch other people who I'd like and admire. I become a fan of someone. I find out and think, and I could get myself adjacent to them. Perhaps they're doing some training, and go and take on board that. And then I never feel I'm ever going to be as good as them. But if I take a couple of those little things and try to apply it in what I do, then I'm moving forward. Because if I know it's a cliche. If I stand still, if I'm not working on the next thing and the thing after that I'm not moving forward at all.
Yeah.
If I get to the end of one tour of a show, I can't do the same thing again in the same place. It's got to be something different, and it's got to be something that's a step up. So I can't stand still. I always have to chase.
So when you've created all your bits and bobs, how do people come and see you? Go and or keep in contact with what you're up to, because some things might not suit them, some things might not be the right thing for them.
Of course. So the easiest way I found recently is I'm putting everything, because we all used to have websites and things. Yeah. I'm such an early adopter of the internet. I try and grab as much as I can Gav Cross. So that's me, because I'm Gavin Cross. Gavin Cross is a young, scared, neurodivergent, bookish, nerdy sci-fi kid. Still here. That's Gavin Cross. Gav Cross is much more confident, much more performative, and he comes out on podcasts and in performances.
Yep.
So Gav Cross don't go looking for Gavin Cross. He's boring. If you go looking for @Gav Cross or my Linktree /Gav Cross or my cousins /Father Christmas, and then that Linktree I'm trying to use because it's easier to update a Linktree than it is a website.
Yeah.
And that's where you can find things like I've recently recorded and put War of the Worlds Unabridged on YouTube. I've got 50 to 60 Victorian ghost stories on there. Some of them are varying quality of my delivery. That's where anything performative that's public, because a lot of the performances I do are not public. So next week I'm in libraries for schools and during the week, and so that's not public, but any public shows are on there. Linktree,
great
/Gav Cross, and that's more than enough. Come and join me on a Monday night, and I'll read you a ghost story.
Oh, what a lovely invitation. We'll all be there. So there
Always
we go. Well, there you go. Even better. Gav, thank you ever so much for having a chat with me today. It has been an absolute pleasure, as always. And yeah, hope to. Oh, say hello to your cousin for us, will you?
Will do.
We've all been good.
He's around, very, very attainable. I kind of like take the whole of December off.
Yeah.
Relax, kick back, drink sherry. He's out there. 35 shows minimum.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Goodbye, sir. Goodbye.
Bye.
This was a Switch Motivation production from Switch Performance Limited. Music by Dennis Kischuk from Pixabay, the Motivational Mindset Podcast. Download, listen, subscribe